Alright, so I know what you might be thinking. Why an Undertale video in 2021? Shouldn't I made that back in like 2017? Well, maybe, but I need other content than Roblox and Rainbow Six, so I'm just gonna do a tier list today. This isn't gonna be like one of those regular tier lists ranking favorite characters or how hard a boss is. This one's gonna be about how strong each character is. I'll be ranking their strengths, weaknesses, and their powers, and deciding who's the strongest. So that sounds like fun. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is not fact. I probably got a ton of things wrong in it. So just comment down below if you disagree with what I said. I sound kind of awkward. It's because it's the first time ever using my voice in a video. It's kind of getting weird just talking to a screen. Anyways, let's get started with F tier. Alright, starting with F tier, the weakest of the weak, the worst of the worst, and starting off as the weakest character in Undertale is gonna be Monster Kid. Monster Kid is by far the weakest character in the series. Sure, his stats are better than a couple characters, but he doesn't even attack you, so it doesn't really matter. Even though I kinda like him as a character, he's not terrible. He's still the weakest in the series, and that's why he's at the bottom. Next up on the list is the dummy. The dummy is just a training dummy. He's found in the ruins, and he's the first enemy the player actually ever fights. He doesn't really do anything. All he really can do is just walk away, which is better than Monster Kid. Next up on the list is Whimsin. Whimsin is a weird little insect guy that you meet in the ruins during the first parts of the game. He's alright. He can actually fight, unlike the last two characters, and he does this by shooting little moths at you. The only problem with him is he's about as strong as a piece of paper. If you hit him once, he'll go down. Not to mention, if you actually try talking to him, he'll run away like a coward. So that's why he's at F. Next up on the list is Jerry. Jerry's a monster you meet at Snowdin, and according to the game wiki, he's the worst character in the series. He doesn't actually fight, but he's pretty durable. So that's why he's going higher, despite not being able to attack. And I think the only way he can actually attack is by annoying his opponent to death. Next up, and rounding off F tier, is Migosp. Migosp is this weird cockroach monster you meet in the ruins. And he's actually not terrible. He has decent durability, and he can summon insects to attack you with. But his only issue is, if he's alone and no other monsters with him, all he'll do is dance. So the only thing he'll actually be useful for is team fights. Alright, that pretty much sums it up for F tier, so let's move on to E tier. E tier has some alright monsters, but they still have pretty noticeable flaws. Starting off E tier, we got Doggo. If you're wondering why a member of the Royal Guard is this low on the list, well, he's got some pretty big weaknesses. He does wield 2 daggers, and he's pretty efficient using them, not to mention his durability's not terrible. His big problem is that he's blind. He can only see things when they're moving, and that's not a good trait to have in a fight. How do you even get his job? Next up in E tier, I'm putting Washwa. This weird little duck creature, all he wants to do is just keep people clean, and that's respectable, I guess, but he's not exactly the best fighter. All he can really do is summon soap, and that's just basically a mild annoyance to people if they don't want to keep clean. And due to his personality of being a germophobic, fighting dirty enemies would actually just cause him to run away. Next up is Moldsmal. Moldsmal is pretty underwhelming. He just looks like Jello. All he can really do is fire slam at people, and in the game you can just spare him right off the bat. Nothing too impressive, he's literally just slime. Frogget's one of the first monsters you ever meet in the underground, so it's kind of a shame I'm putting him this low. All he can really do is fire flies at people and hop around like a frog. But that's all just kind of underwhelming, so that's why he's this low. Vegetoid isn't actually that terrible of a monster. His durability is pretty good, not to mention his ability to throw vegetables can be somewhat painful, but his biggest flaw is all he really wants to do is feed people their greens. He'll even heal his enemies in order for them to eat their vegetables, so that's not exactly the best trait to have during a fight. Next up in E tier, we have Luke's. This weird Mike Wazowski looking monster has the ability of throwing some sort of sphere-like projectiles at his opponents. I have no idea what they are. Are they rocks? Bubbles? Who knows? But what I do know is that he does have some sort of rage mode he can fly into if he's bullied, which greatly increases the power and speed of his attacks. So he's not terrible, but he's still kind of bad. We're almost done with E tier, and Vulcan's up next. He can fire lava from his head, and he shoots lightning for some reason. And he actually sounds pretty strong, right? Well, kinda. His personality kinda hinders his abilities, as he's really kind and all he wants to do is help people, which is not exactly the best trait to have in a fight. So even though I love Vulcan, he's going in E tier. Alright, rounding up E tier, we have Ice Cap. Ice Cap actually has some pretty decent combat capabilities and alright durability, and his power of shooting icicles is actually kind of impressive, but he does have a giant weakness in the fact that he's a huge narcissist. All he really adores is his hat, and if someone were to take that away, he'd fall into a depression, and he'd lose a ton of his durability and attack. So all you really gotta do is aim for the hat, and that's how you take him down. Not exactly the best fighter. Alright, it's time for D tier. D tier has some alright monsters. They're kinda strong, but they still have very major weaknesses. They're just better than the E tier ones. Starting off D tier, we have Lesser Dog. Lesser Dog is one of the members of the Canine Guard in Snowden, and he dons plate armor and wields a sword and shield. He's pretty good with his weapons in combat, but he does have a big weakness in the fact that if you throw him a stick, he'll instantly back down and love you forever. He does have a strange ability that if you pet him, his neck grows larger, and I'm not really sure if there's a limit to how far you can stretch his neck, but that's not exactly the best power to have in a fight. I'm putting Mygospell in D tier as well. Despite being much stronger than his counterpart Mygosp, he still has the same weaknesses. So the best I can give him is D, despite being way stronger. Much how like Mygospell is a stronger version of Mygosp, Parsnic's just a stronger version of Vegetoid. All he really does differently is summon snakes instead of vegetables, which is pretty strong. They're snakes. I'm scared of snakes. Sorry I have to do this, but Temmie is going next on the list. Temmie does have the ability to stretch her limbs out to seemingly infinite lengths, but her durability and power isn't exactly the best, and not to mention her big weakness to muscles, which causes her to run away for some reason. I wish I had muscles. Snowdrake's going next in D tier. He does have the ability to summon sickles for some reason, but besides that, his durability and power are kinda average, and not to mention he tells really bad jokes. He should still be a comedian instead of a fighter though, because he's kinda awful. Mold Big, like the name suggests, is just a bigger, stronger version of Mold Small. All it really does differently is fire more projectiles at a faster rate. However, just like Mold Small, it has a very, very low level of intelligence, so sparing it or making it passive is pretty easy. Giftshot's going in D tier as well. Although his stats are alright, he's literally just a deer. I mean, he does have some snow powers, kinda, but what really sets him this high is because of his personality. Unlike other monsters who are really friendly, he's actually pretty paranoid, so that's better, kinda. It was pretty evident by the name that Greater Dog was going to be stronger than Lesser Dog. Greater Dog has much bigger plate armor and a massive spear, and not to mention his attacks are much more powerful than Lesser Dog's. But just like Lesser Dog, he has the same weaknesses. If you throw him a stick, he'll go passive. Not to mention, if you were to pet him a lot and or ignore him, he'll either walk away or love you forever. Did you know Childrake and Snowdrake aren't actually brothers? They're apparently just really good friends. And Childrake does have similar attacks to Snowdrake, but the thing setting him apart and making him much higher is the fact that his personality is greatly different. He'll actually try to fight you, unlike Snowdrake, who just wants to tell jokes. Alright, running off D tier, we have Aaron. Aaron's this big muscular seahorse guy, and his powers consist of flexing. He does have some decent durability and strength, but his main power is from flexing. Every time he flexes, he gains a lot of power, but the problem is, much like the Kaioken ability from Dragon Ball, if he uses it too much, he'll end up flexing himself out of a room. How do you even do that? Alright, it's time to get into C tier. These characters are actually pretty strong, but they still have some weaknesses, so let's get into it. Alright, to begin off C tier, we have Moldessa. Moldessa is kinda like Mold Small and Mold Big, except it has this weird distorted face. And because of that distorted face, it can't really tell apart friend from foe, so it'll just kind of attack everybody. It does have a much higher attack stat and defense stat than both, so that's why it's this high. Next up in C tier, we have Pyrope. Pyrope does have the ability to throw bombs at people and shoot fire, but his only main issue is that in cooler environments, his power weakens. So overall, he's not half bad. Alright, next up are the number 1 nose-nuzzling champions, Dogami and Dagaressa. Dogami and Dagaressa are actually pretty strong monsters. Their durability's not half bad, and they've got huge axes that they wield pretty proficiently. Their only real problem is their poor eyesight. If I had to rank one higher than the other, I'd probably put Dagaressa higher than Dogami, because she actually can go into a rage if Dogami dies, while Dogami just goes into depression if Dagaressa dies. So, that's cool. The only reason he's this high on the list is because he can't really die. He's a ghost. Nothing can really hurt him. But because of his personality, which is being depressed, and only having like one attack, he's only going in C tier. Alright, next up on the list is going to be Shiren. Shiren's singing ability is actually pretty impressive. Sadly, her defense is pretty mediocre, and singing's the only thing she's got going for her, and she doesn't have anything else to really mix up her attacks, so that's why she's in C tier. Final Frogus is a stronger version of Frogget. He only goes higher than Shiren due to his impressive attack and defense. Whimslot takes every weakness that Whimsun had and just throws it down the drain. His attack and defense is really impressive, and his double-bladed spear is actually really cool. I'm putting So Sorry next on the list. A nervous personality might be a hindrance to some people, but So Sorry actually takes that weakness and uses it as a tool to lower his opponent's guard. He has an impressive tail attack and the ability to summon monsters by drawing with a pencil. His stats are pretty awful though, so that's why he's in the middle of C tier. I'm not really sure what Glide's supposed to be. Supposed to be a fish? A whale? Well, whatever he is, he's actually decently strong. Glide's attack and defense don't actually have a number associated with them. If you actually try to check his stats, all they say is high. So I'm assuming he's pretty strong. Glide actually does have the power to fire some star-like projectiles at his opponents, but his only really glaring flaw is he's pretty narcissistic, and he's pretty pretentious too. After doing research for this video, I was surprised how strong Sunderplane actually is. I mean, I'm not sure what I was expecting from a plane, but it can shoot bombs, summon smaller planes, and kill you with gas, so that's actually really strong. Holy crap! I might actually get a lot of hate for this, but I'm putting Flowey at the top of C tier. Flowey does have the ability to summon some vines, shoot petals, and even burrow into the ground, but those things aren't really that strong. Maybe annoying at best, but they're certainly not going to take down some of the top tier characters. Flowey's greatest ability in my opinion is his stealth. He was able to incapacitate and even kill several high tier characters due to the element of surprise. His durability is somewhat impressive too. He was able to tank a fireball from Toriel head on, but it was only one. So I guess I'll just chalk it down to mediocre. I suppose I'll also have to bring up the whole soul absorbing ability. I'm not really sure how to rank Flowey with this soul absorbing ability, because he was able to do it during the true ending, but if he had that ability, why didn't he just do it when Frisk first fell into the underground? So I'm going to chalk that up to inconclusive for now. So I'm going to put Flowey top C tier. Alright, we're going into B tier now. B tier actually has some pretty strong monsters, but they still have some weaknesses, so let's get started. Alright, kicking off B tier, we have Night Knight. Night Knight's a mercenary, and she wields a strange staff called the Good Morning Star, which is able to summon mini moons that shoot meteorites towards her target. She sounds like an unstoppable monster, and for the most part, she is, but her only weakness is that if you sing to her, well, she'll actually fall asleep, so that's not exactly the best weakness. Alright, this may come to a surprise, but I'm putting Papyrus in B tier. I initially was going to put him in C tier because of how incompetent he was during the Snowden part of the adventure in Undertale, but after seeing him in battle, I've decided to put him up a couple notches. He is one of the few characters in the game with soul manipulation, and we've never actually seen his special attack, but what we've seen so far, his bone abilities are pretty impressive. It's probably obvious though during the fight that Papyrus was holding back, because he never actually intended to kill the human. All he really wanted to do was just capture them. Papyrus overall is a pretty solid fighter with decent durability, so what really sets him back? It's his personality. Like many other monsters in the game, his personality really sets him back. He's way too nice to actually try to hurt anyone for real, and Undyne even doesn't want to add him into the Royal Guard because of his personality alone. After an important character like Papyrus, who's next? Well, it's Magic. Magic's this wizard guy, and he has the power to create these strange orbs that chase and shoot lasers at his opponents. The amount of orbs Magic can create is pretty ambiguous, so I'll chalk it down to about 5, maybe 6, because I'm not sure if 3 is actually his limit. I think one of his greatest abilities, however, is his ability to confuse people. His confusion spell actually causes the player's controls in the game to be inverted, so that's a really impressive power to have. That's why he's so high. I'm putting Lux's way cooler cousin Astigmatism in B tier. He possesses the same attacks Lux does, but his attack is way higher, and not to mention, his abilities are way stronger than Lux's. Not only are his orb things way greater in number, but they are also able to ricochet off the walls of the battle arena, which make it much more dangerous. Much like Lux, he also has the ability to go into some kind of rage mode, making his attacks way stronger and faster. That's why he's in B tier. He's really terrifying. Oh my god. Alright, I'm putting the Mad Dummy up next. What really makes him this high is his really impressive arsenal and his kind of immortality. Every time he's hit with a physical attack, he can just rebuild himself, which is pretty impressive during a fight. He also packs with him a lot of missiles and a ton of robotic and normal dummy minions. Oh yeah, and he also has a knife, for some reason. His only weaknesses really being that magic actually still hurts him, and his minions are more on the incompetent side, so that's why he's in B tier. Alright, Mad Mew Mew's going in B tier as well. It's the same ghost that possessed the Mad Dummy, but this time it's in this weird anime doll. It does have soul manipulation, which puts it higher than the Mad Dummy, not to mention the whole immunity to physical attacks, so that's pretty impressive. The only weaknesses Mad Mew Mew has is that it actually can get hurt by magic attacks, much like the Mad Dummy. And not to mention, if the body of Mad Mew Mew is attacked enough, it will actually start to crack and eventually fall apart. Alright, I'm putting Alphys up next. Alphys' true combat abilities are unknown, but it is seen during the true ending that she does possess some sort of electrical powers, so that's kind of interesting. She is able to hack into several pieces of machinery throughout the underground, and not to mention, she was able to repair your phone in a matter of seconds. Her smarts actually managed to help you a lot throughout your journey in the underground, as she was able to disable tons of traps that Mettaton planted for you. I can assume that she has the same arsenal Mettaton has, with the small little robots that throw hearts, and combining that with some electrical powers might actually make her pretty deadly. Her only really problem or weakness is her personality. She's probably too scared to get into an actual fight, so that's why she's not in A tier. I'm putting RG1 and 2 in B tier as well. They're Undyne's only competent guards, and not to mention they don full plate armor and really long swords, which actually makes them pretty deadly. Their durability and power is pretty high, but what really makes them strong is the fact that they work as a team. Their ability to do team attacks together really well makes them pretty deadly. Not to mention, if one of them dies, the other flies into a rage mode, making their attack power and attack speed much stronger. They're probably the only reason why the Royal Guard isn't a joke besides Undyne herself. Alright, rounding off B tier is going to be Mettaton Neo. I know you're probably thinking, why is Mettaton Neo this low? It's Mettaton's ultimate form. Well, the big problem with Mettaton Neo is it sacrifices a lot of defense for attack, which might be a good plan, but her attack still isn't that high. Not to mention, in the actual fight against Mettaton Neo, he doesn't really even attack, all he does is stand there. A big theory on why that is because Mettaton Neo was supposed to only kill humans, and because the player at that point has killed so many monsters, them themselves have become a monster. Nevertheless, until we see more of Mettaton Neo, they're going to be planted top of B tier. Alright, it's time for A tier. These characters are actually really strong and barely have any weaknesses, so let's get started. Alright, this one might seem a little high, but I'm putting Muffet in A tier. Her ability to bind enemies in spider webs that are surprisingly strong is really handy. Not to mention, she does have soul manipulation. She does have an army of spiders by her side too, and a giant, creepy looking monster one in the shape of a cupcake. Her only really weakness is her greed. She can actually be paid to lower her attack and attack speed, which is actually a pretty big problem if your opponent actually has money on them. Granted, she does raise her prices every time she lowers them, so I guess that's something? Alright, next up in A tier, we have Mettaton. Mettaton in his base form actually is pretty powerful. His durability is in the hundreds, and not to mention, he has the ability to fire laser beams from his hands, and he's a chainsaw, which is pretty handy. I'm not so sure if his metal body is immune to magic, but all physical attacks are immediately negated because metal is metal, and it's really hard. Mettaton's only real weakness is his narcissistic attitude. If someone were to point out a mirror, he'd immediately turn around and look at it, which is a really bad thing to have during a fight, because turning his back is actually kind of a weak point. Kinda. For him. The other weakness is his low battery life. Mettaton will actually run out of battery really fast, so all you have to do to beat him is just wait him out. But when he's firing lasers at you, and you can't really do anything to hurt him, can you actually survive that long? Next up in A tier is going to be base form Undyne. Undyne dons full plate armor and the ability to summon spears. Her attacks are really powerful, and her durability is really good too. She's also one of the few characters in the series with soul manipulation, giving the player a shield but the inability to move, which is actually pretty impressive considering she can shoot spears anywhere and anytime. She also shows some pretty impressive strength feats too, being able to suplex boulders just cause she can. Her only real weaknesses are her susceptibility to heat, and when she's in heat for too long she'll actually go unconscious, and the fact that she dons full plate armor, which actually lowers her speed quite a bit. But other than that, she's a monster. A terrifying monster. I debated whether or not to put Undyne or Mettaton X higher than one another, and I ended up putting Mettaton X higher just because of the stat difference. X might not be as durable as he was in his base form, but his power greatly makes up for it. He has the ability to summon hordes of robotic minions, and not to mention he has access to many explosives. His legs are also pretty strong, being able to kick someone really hard. What really came to a surprise is the fact that Mettaton can actually rewind time, which is a really impressive ability. Like I said before, his only weakness is really his narcissistic attitude, and the fact that he's not as durable as he was in his base form in X mode. Despite these weaknesses, however, X is by far one of the strongest characters in Undertale that isn't a reality bender. I'm putting the Caretaker of the Ruins, Toriel, next. Former wife of the king displays incredible power. She's able to summon massive waves of fireballs, and she's really good with magic. She's able to knock down characters like Asgore really easily too. Her only weakness is her personality. Her kind nature makes her hold back during fights, and that can lead to her dropping her guard quite easily, which makes her susceptible to killing blows. Alright, rounding off A tier is the King of the Underground, Asgore. There is no doubt that Asgore is an absolute powerhouse. He's able to dish out as much as he can receive too. Not to mention, the fact that he's able to take out 6 humans before the player arrived is an admirable feat in its own. According to a book in the library in Snowden, one human soul is as strong as the entire race of monsters living in the underground. So being able to kill one by himself is pretty impressive. He's also stronger than base form Undyne. During their trainings, he only ever dodged her attacks and never laid a finger on her. Even when she was able to knock him down, it was pretty clear Asgore was holding back. To top it all off, Asgore is pretty proficient with his trident, and not to mention, he's able to summon waves of fireballs, which is actually pretty deadly. The only thing really holding him back from S tier is his personality. Asgore's clearly guilty about his past actions in killing humans, so during the fight with you, he'll just stand there and take your attacks without even dodging. Not to mention, it's strongly implied that he holds back massively during the fight too. Alright, now it's time for the big ones, the S tiers. Let's get started. Alright, the first one up is probably the face of Undertale and the most popular character, Sans. Nobody needs to tell you that Sans is a powerhouse. His soul manipulation and extremely powerful bone attacks are nothing short of insane. He also uses an ability called KR, or Chromatic Retribution by the fandom, which is some kind of bleed damage that he uses on enemies. He also wields powerful cannons called Gaster Blasters, which do insane damage to an opponent. Sans is by far one of the strongest characters in the game, but he still does have his flaws. Sans' abysmal stats actually make you wonder how he does so much damage in the first place. His stats are 1 attack and 1 defense, which is actually lower than Monster Kid, the lowest character in this tier list. Sans' other weakness is low stamina. He can only dodge a certain number of attacks before going down. I suppose I'll have to also bring up the whole being able to see when the world resets kind of thing. No, I do not believe Sans can actually do that. When he's in the Judgment Hall and he kills you, he tells you by the look at your face that he's killed you before. So I'm gonna chalk it up as he's just pretty smart. Not to mention, if he actually knew that the realities were changing, why doesn't he just change up his attacks during his fight? Despite Sans being extremely powerful and an S tier already, there's still a few characters that I think are much stronger than him. Alright, this one might be controversial, but I'm putting Undyne the Undying higher than Sans. I forgot to mention this before about Undyne in her base form, but she does have an ability that only humans can usually access called Determination. It's when your body decides that it does not want to die, and ends up making the user immortal for a certain amount of time. Anyways, I rank Undyne the Undying higher than Sans because of her insane power and durability. Due to her releasing her Determination powers, she's able to stay alive for a much longer time despite having a fatal injury. Her massive power boost from this form makes her a really scary opponent, and the only downside to it is, after a while, the Determination gets too unstable and her body begins to melt. I don't have an exact time on how long she can last in this form, but she did say it was long enough for Alphys to evacuate a large portion of the monster population during her fight with the human. Okay, this is definitely going to be controversial. I'm putting the Amalgamates over Sans and Undyne respectively. The only reason they're going this high is because they're essentially unkillable. No magic, no attack, nothing can really actually put them down forever due to them being injected with way too much determination. But unlike Naps to Bloop, these guys are actually willing to fight. They will kill you if they need to, which is what makes them so high. Alright, that wraps up the S tier. Now it's time for the S plus tier. These are like the reality benders and the strongest of the strong in Undertale. So let's end this once and for all. Alright, the first one in S tier is going to be WD Gaster. The only reason Gaster is at the bottom of S plus tier is because we don't really know that much about him. We do know that there was some accident in the past which caused him to be shattered across time and space, but we don't really have a clue what that means yet. We do know, however, that he is reality breaking, because during the start of the game, when you name your character, if you try to name him Gaster, the entire game shuts down. So that does give him an indicator on he does have some reality bending powers. Alright, next up on the list is the main protagonist of the series, Frisk. Much like Undyne, Frisk does have the determination powers, but due to being a human, she can actually come back endlessly. Frisk also does have some pretty impressive durability and strength, being able to one-shot a majority of the cast of Undertale during a genocide run. Frisk also has the ability of dodging as much as she wants without getting tired. Or he. I'm not really sure what gender Frisk is. What truly makes Frisk S+ tier is her ability to alter timelines in reality through the processes of saving, loading, and resetting. Alright, next up on the list is Kara. Kara is an odd case as they're only shown at the end of the genocide run, but it's assumed they're stronger than Frisk due to being able to reset the world despite Frisk's resistances. I'm gonna put Omega Flowey higher than Kara, and you might be mad at me for this, but it's pretty obvious that Omega Flowey is stronger. While Kara is only 1 human soul, Omega Flowey's absorbed 6. Flowey also has the same reality-bending powers Frisk and Kara possess. He can save in the middle of the game whenever he wants, and not to mention, he has the ability to fire nukes, laser beams, and other things such as flies and flamethrowers. He's even able to close the game if he kills you. It also should be known that you cannot reset the game when Flowey takes it over. So that also adds on to his power. His only real weakness is that the souls inside of him that he absorbed can actually rebel against him and end up causing him to lose all his power. Alright, it's time for the strongest character in Undertale. And the strongest character in Undertale is... drumroll please. Alright, you probably already know who it is. Asriel Dreamer is by far the strongest character in Undertale. With the power of 6 human souls and the entirety of the underground monster population, he has insane power. When checking his stats, they are literally stated to be infinite. It's probably even possible he has universe-ending powers as well. Even if he needs to fight without even erasing someone in the blink of an eye, he possesses a massive arsenal of swords, laser cannons, and even massive stars. I don't even need to go into detail about his Angel of Death form. He's that powerful. There's no doubt in my mind that this guy's the strongest Undertale has to offer. Alright. I'm done. Oh. I missed a tier. God tier. Oh no.